The envelope was empty. Adaeze's fingers went cold before her mind caught up. She turned it upside down, shook it, pressed her palm flat against the inside lining as if the visa could somehow be hiding in the paper itself. Her suitcase was open on the floor. Her taxi was waiting outside. Her flight, the flight she had worked 4 years to board, left in 3 hours. The visa was gone. And somewhere across that compound, her stepmother Ngozi was making tea. Stay with this story. Because what happened 5 years later, what Adaeze did when she finally had power, will make your jaw drop. She had not always been this close to leaving. For most of her 22 years, Adaeze Okafor had been the kind of girl who stayed in Enugu, stayed in her father's house, stayed quiet when she needed to scream. Her mother died when she was 9. Her father, Emmanuel, raised her alone with the tenderness of 2 parents compressed into one man. He was a fabric trader, which meant some months were feast and some were hunger, but he always made sure Adaeze ate first. He died of a heart attack when she was 19. No warning. No goodbye. Just a Tuesday morning that became the dividing line between the life she knew and everything that followed. After Emmanuel was buried, the relatives gathered, the way relatives do in times of grief and in times of property. That was when Ngozi appeared. Not as a stranger. As her father's younger brother's new wife, the one nobody had met yet, the one who arrived with a wide smile and expensive perfume and a daughter named Chisholm who watched Adaeze from across the compound with eyes that calculated rather than grieved. They moved in within the month. Adaeze told herself it was fine. Told herself the house was her father's and no one could take that from her. She buried herself in studying night school, then a design certification program, then the scholarship application that changed everything. The Alinta Fashion Incubator. London. Fully funded. She applied twice and failed. The third time, she wrote her application essay at 2 in the morning by phone light because Ngozi had complained about the electricity bill. She got in. The letter arrived on a Wednesday. Adaeze read it 6 times standing at the compound gate. Then she cried, the silent, chest-shaking kind, because her father was not there to read it with her. Ngozi was there, though. She hugged Adaeze warmly and told the neighbors what a wonderful daughter she had raised. She made pepper soup and called it a celebration. She smiled the whole evening. That night, while Adaeze slept the deep sleep of someone whose prayers have finally been answered, Ngozi opened her bag. The documents were in a brown envelope inside the front pocket, the original visa papers, the scholarship acceptance letter, the embassy confirmation slip. Ngozi removed them with the practiced calm of someone who had been planning this for weeks. She did not hesitate. She did not shake. She slid the papers into the folds of her wrapper and walked back to her room in the dark. Chisholm was awake, sitting up in bed, waiting. Neither of them spoke. There was nothing left to say. The plan was already in motion. What Adaeze did not know, what she could not have known, was that 3 months before her acceptance letter arrived, Ngozi had begun making visits to a man named Mr. Is, a mid-level clerk who had once processed her late brother-in-law's travel documents and who owed Ngozi a favor he had been avoiding for 2 years. The favor was simple: amend a name on a scholarship application. Substitute a photograph. Submit it before the system flagged the discrepancy. Chisholm had applied to the same program twice and been rejected both times. Her portfolio was average. Her interview was worse. But Adaeze's portfolio, the one Ngozi had quietly photographed over 3 nights on her phone, was exceptional. The scholarship committee had said so in the acceptance letter. They had accepted Adaeze. Ngozi intended for them to receive Chisholm. The amendment went through 5 days before Adaeze's departure date. By the time Adaeze was packing her suitcase, Chisholm's biometrics were already attached to a new submission bearing Adaeze's scholarship reference number. The visa existed. Just not in Adaeze's name. Not anymore. The morning Adaeze discovered the empty envelope, she ran to Ngozi's room first. That detail matters. She ran to her stepmother, the woman she still trusted, before she ran anywhere else. Ngozi performed shock beautifully. She held Adaeze's hands, pressed her lips together, shook her head slowly. You must have misplaced them. You were so excited, maybe you put them somewhere without thinking. She helped Adaeze search. She even cried a little, the dry-eyed kind that looks like emotion from a distance. By the time the neighbors began arriving, drawn by Adaeze's distress, Ngozi had positioned herself as the devastated mother figure, helpless in the face of such a careless daughter. She was always disorganized, Ngozi whispered to Mama Uju from next door. I kept telling Emmanuel, God rest him, but he spoiled her. Adaeze missed her flight. The scholarship office received a note, filed by Mr. Is, who was very efficient, indicating that the original candidate had voluntarily withdrawn due to family circumstances. The spot had already been transferred. The process was complete. Chisholm boarded the flight Adaeze should have been on, carrying a bag she had packed for someone else's life. And here is the moment this story asks you to sit inside, not rush past. Because what came next for Adaeze was not a montage. It was not a series of quick clips leading smoothly to triumph. It was 18 months of a specific kind of pain that has no clean name. She tried to report the fraud. She went to the scholarship office, to the embassy, to the local government office that her father's old friend worked in. Everyone was kind. Everyone listened. And then everyone explained, gently, firmly, that without proof, without documents, without a witness who would speak, there was very little that could be done. The visa records showed a voluntary withdrawal. The submission paperwork was clean. Mr. Iza's name appeared nowhere. Ngozi, meanwhile, had become indispensable in the neighborhood. She organized a women's cooperative. She helped 3 families navigate their own paperwork. She became the person people called when they needed someone who knew how things worked. Adaeze became the cautionary tale. The girl who got a scholarship and lost it through carelessness. The one whose grief had clearly affected her mind, because who loses a visa from their own bag? She moved out of her father's house after Ngozi suggested, sweetly, in front of witnesses, that perhaps the space was too painful for Adaeze given her memories there. She moved into a single room in a shared compound 3 streets away. She had 12,000 naira, a sewing machine her father had bought her at 16, and a rage she did not yet know what to do with. Then something happened that nobody predicted. She started sewing. Not for income at first, or not only. She sewed because it was the one thing that made the noise in her head go quiet. She sewed through the nights she would have spent crying. She sewed Igbo Ankara into silhouettes that had never been tried before, structured shoulders, asymmetrical hems, cloth that knew where it was from and where it was going simultaneously. Her friend Kechi, who sold hair products in the market, gave her a table one Saturday and told her to put something out. She sold everything by noon. A fashion blogger came to the market 3 weeks later for an unrelated story and photographed Adaeze's table without asking. The post got 11,000 likes. The comments asked where to buy. Adaeze had no website. She had an Instagram account with 40 followers and a phone with a cracked screen. By the following weekend she had 800 followers and more orders than she could fill alone. She named the label Yua, the Igbo word for world. Because that was what she intended. She hired Nkechi's cousin. Then a second girl from the compound. She rented a workspace above a mobile money shop. She applied for a small business grant from a Lagos fashion NGO and wrote the application on a borrowed laptop in 2 hours because she had been writing applications her whole life and she knew exactly how. She got it. She did not tell Ngozi. She did not tell anyone in that old neighborhood. She simply worked. Meanwhile, in London, Chisholm was drowning. The thing about wearing someone else's life is that the fit is never right. Chisholm had arrived on Adaeze's scholarship to study a subject, textile design and cultural fashion history, for which she had no genuine foundation. The lecturers expected the student whose portfolio had been exceptional. What they got was Chisholm, who struggled from the first week and spent the first month hoping the gap between expectation and reality would somehow close. It did not close. She changed her course unit twice. She picked up shifts at a restaurant to cover expenses the scholarship did not fully fund, which violated her visa conditions. She stopped posting on social media after the second year because the version of herself she had been performing, successful, thriving, arrived, was exhausting to maintain. She called Ngozi less and less. What she did not know what no one had told her was that the institution had flagged her file 18 months into her program. Not because of anything obvious. Because of something small, a biometric inconsistency in the original application scan versus the passport she had presented at entry. A difference of millimeters in a facial recognition database. An algorithm, not a person, that raised a quiet flag. The investigation that followed was not dramatic. It was bureaucratic and slow and thorough. It took 14 months. When it concluded, an immigration officer called Chisholm into an office on a Tuesday and placed a printed report in front of her. She did not deny it. There was nothing left to deny. The deportation notice gave her 14 days. She called Ngozi from outside the immigration office, standing on a pavement in East London in February, in a coat that wasn't warm enough. Ngozi picked up on the fourth ring. When Chisholm finished speaking, there was a long silence on the line. Then Ngozi said, "We will sort it out." They did not sort it out. Mr. Adaeze, the clerk who had processed the original amendment, had been dismissed from his position 2 years prior in an anti-corruption review. The favor network Ngozi had relied on had dissolved. The relatives who might have intervened were no longer interested in a crisis that brought no benefit to them. Ngozi made 12 phone calls over 2 days. None of them produced anything. Chisholm came home 14 days later. 1 bag. Economy class. The borrowed life returned. The same week Chisholm's plane landed in Enugu, a different email arrived in Adaeze's inbox. She almost missed it. She was in the workspace cutting fabric for an order, her phone propped against a bolt of cloth, when the notification came through. She picked it up to dismiss it. Then she read the sender, Alinta Fashion Incubator, International Outreach Division. She set down the scissors. The email was from a program director named Serena Walsh. She had seen your designs featured in a diaspora fashion newsletter. She wanted to know if Adaeze would be interested in joining their Emerging Designers Residency, London, 6 months, fully sponsored. The program had just opened a new cohort specifically for designers from the African continent. Same institution. Same city. Her own name. Adaeze sat down on the floor of the workspace because her legs stopped working. She read it 4 times. Then she called Nkechi and said absolutely nothing for 45 seconds. Nkechi, who knew Adaeze's silences as well as she knew her voice, started crying before Adaeze said a single word. The application process took 3 weeks. Every document was clean. Every submission was in Adaeze's name. When the confirmation came through, official, stamped, legitimate, she printed it and placed it in the same kind of brown envelope her visa had once lived in. She held it for a long time. Then she went to find Ngozi. Not for revenge. Understand that. If you are waiting for a confrontation scene full of screaming and accusations, that is not what happened. What happened was quieter, and because of that, it was worse. Ngozi was at the gate of the compound, Adaeze's father's compound, which Ngozi still lived in, when Adaeze arrived. Chisholm was inside. The neighborhood had already heard the news about Chisholm's return. The story moving through the market stalls and compound walls was fragmented and whispered, because nobody quite wanted to say the full thing out loud. Ngozi saw Adaeze come in and her face did something complicated. Not fear exactly. Something more like recognition, the look of someone who has been waiting for a particular knock and finally hears it at the door. She started to speak. Adaeze raised her hand. Gently. The way you stop a sentence you have already heard. I am not here to take anything from you, Adaeze said. Her voice was very even. I am here so you can see my face before I go. So you know that what you took from me did not stay taken. She showed Ngozi the envelope. Not the document inside, just the envelope. The thickness of it. The weight of what it contained. I forgive you, Adaeze said. Not because what you did was small. But because I refuse to carry you into what comes next. She turned around. She walked back through the neighborhood, past Mama Uju's gate, past the mobile money shop, past the place where her father used to park his van, and she did not look back. Not once. 3 days before her departure, Adaeze went to her father's grave. She brought nothing except herself and the confirmation letter. She sat in the grass for a long time. She did not speak aloud. She did not need to. The conversation was one of those that happens beneath language, in the chest, in the particular quality of afternoon light, in the feeling of having finally arrived somewhere you were always supposed to reach. She thought about the girl who had paced this same ground after Emmanuel was buried, trying to understand how a life could end without warning. She thought about the night school classroom where she had taught herself pattern drafting from a borrowed textbook. She thought about the table in Ketchi's market where she had spread her work out and waited, terrified, to be seen. Her father used to say, "Your mind is your visa, my daughter. They can refuse a stamp. They cannot refuse a mind." He had been right. He just hadn't known how literally. The airport, departure day. Mama Chidinma was there, the retired tailor who had taken Adaeze under her wing in the worst year, who had taught her that a woman who moves like she has already arrived cannot easily be turned back. She pressed both of Adaeze's hands between hers and said nothing. The silence was the blessing. Nkechi was there, crying from the moment they pulled into the car park, crying through check-in, crying at the security barrier in the specific way of someone who is devastated by joy and would not have it any other way. Adaeze moved through the terminal with her own passport in her hand. Her own name on the boarding pass. Her own history, documented, legitimate, and, in the bag on her shoulder. She thought briefly of another morning in this same terminal. The empty envelope. The cold fingers. The taxi outside and the world collapsing inward without warning. She thought, look what that money made. At the gate, before she boarded, she took out her phone and opened the journal app she had been writing in since the second year of the worst time. The last entry, written the night before, read, "I am afraid. I am ready." These two things are not opposites. She added one line, "Papa, I am going." Then she put the phone away and walked through the gate. And that is where most stories would end. The girl boards the plane. The music swells. Credits roll. Justice, delivered. Case closed. But this story does not end there. Because 3 weeks after Adaeze arrived in London, 3 weeks into her residency, living legitimately in the city that was supposed to have been her starting line 5 years ago, she received a message from an unknown number. It was Chisholm. The message was long. It took Chisholm 4 drafts to send, which Adaeze would only learn later. It did not ask for forgiveness. It did not make excuses. It said, plainly and without decoration, that Chisholm had known from the beginning. That she had told herself the guilt would fade. That it had not faded. That watching Adaeze build you were from nothing while living on Adaeze's stolen future was the most sustained punishment she had ever experienced. That she was not asking for anything. Only for Adaeze to know that she knew. Adaeze read the message on the tube, on the way to the studio, surrounded by strangers. She did not respond. She sat with it. She thought about what it means to watch someone suffer the consequences of what they did. She thought about whether that constitutes justice, or just the passage of time wearing a justice-shaped mask. She thought about her father's grave and the afternoon light and the strange mercy of having survived something that was designed to finish you. She started to type a response. Deleted it. Started again. She got off at her stop. Walked into the studio. Set down her bag. Looked at the patterns on the wall, her patterns, her work, her name on the door. She picked up her phone. And then, she did something that nobody, not Nkechi, not Mama Chidinma, not the neighbors who watched the whole story unfold from the beginning, nobody predicted. She made a call. Not to Chisholm. Not to Ngozi. To Mr. Is. Because here is what no one knew yet. Adaeze had been collecting. Quietly, carefully, for 3 years, every receipt, every rejected application, every piece of documentation that showed the timeline of what had been done. She had a folder. She had a lawyer she had been consulting for 18 months on a contingency basis. And she had just received, from a contact inside the scholarship institution, a woman who had quietly believed her from the beginning, a single internal memo. Dated 5 years ago. With Mr. Iza's name on it. The case she was about to file was not small. Ngozi, sitting in Adaeze's father's house on the other side of the world, did not yet know it was coming.